Blessings, family. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. And this is our second go round on our discussion on educating our Zulu family in Southern Africa about the Zulu parade in New Orleans. And I'm doing the same lecture over again because there were some audio problems. So hopefully we have it fixed this go round. And actually, I'm going to break up the discussion into two parts. So this is going to be part one, and I'm going to do another video, which is going to be part two. So hopefully it won't be too long. So we are going to add some details and some history to the Zulu parade and help educate our Southern African family on the Pan-African nature of the Zulu Social Club and the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, which does the Zulu parade at the Mardi Gras. So all that and more will be returned in just a moment. And we are back, and I want to just get started. So without further delay, I am going to start our program right now. So, for those who are not familiar with what's going on in the social media sphere, the Amazulu ethnic group of Southern Africa uh, is a bit upset because they're just discovering after 120 something years about the South African, excuse me, the New Orleans Mardi Gras, and more specifically, the Zulu Parade. And so, because the name that the fraternal organization adopted was Zulu, they, the Amazulu of Southern Africa, believe that the African Americans as a whole is trying to mock them. And this is far from the case. And as always, I always recommend that everyone take Africana Studies courses. It is because of misinformation like this and xenophobia that a lot of misinformation is spread in judgments upon people. And so, if you look on the left hand side, you see one of the Zulu Mardi Gras uh, masqueraders that I'm going to call them. They're called crews in terms of each individual tribe or each individual group. And so this group is called the Zulus. And you'll see on his head, the crown is full of feathers. It has a big Z on it for Zulu. And then you see the face is painted in a kind of a silver and black. And this is part of the larger controversy because of the black face component. And I'm here to challenge the nature of the black face component. And we'll get more into that in part two. But to continue, so you see the big Z and, hanging from the neck, and you see a shield. It's on top of a shield in a sphere, and it's a very elaborate costume. And so when the Zulu of South Africa look at this, they do not see themselves. And you're not supposed to, because it is not a full-fledged imitation of South African Zulus. It is an amalgamation of various African peoples from whom the African Americans descend, and is blended together with also indigenous Native American motifs, as well as some European aspects of the whole Mardi Gras parade, because that's where Mardi Gras starts from with the French. And so this is kind of hard for people to understand, and which is why, I have to get into my title. Uh, Instead of saying a historian, I say that I'm an ancestral memory recovery specialist, because this is why we do what we do, is to recover our ancestral memory and to help the world, and more specifically African people, understand each other, and understand history, so that we can create more rigorous strategies for survival in the future, right? So as I stated earlier, what you saw in the garment is a visual representation of Pan-Africanism. And so Pan-Africanism is birthed out of the minds of African Americans who understood the commonness across Africa. And we know this firsthand because of our experience here in the United States. And what people don't realize is that African Americans are the amalgamation of 45 or more different ethnic groups from various locations across the continent of Africa, including Southeast Africa in terms of Madagascar and relations with Zimbabwe, Madagascar in Mozambique, and of course Congo, Angola, Cameroon, Gabon, Nigeria, uh, Benin, Togo, the Ivory Coast or Cote d'Ivoire, Sierra Leone, Senegambia, et cetera, et cetera. And so it is because of this that we have, and this is not to shade, it's just a matter of history. We have more ancestors than the Zulus have because of our unique history and the 45 plus ethnic groups that amalgamated in the United States to create the African American. And so while because you had so many ethnic groups caught in a transatlantic slave holocaust, certain aspects of our history and culture, of course, have been lost, like language, for example, specific aspects of religious, ideas, but a lot of it was retained. And in certain parts of the United States, because of the different histories of the United States, the there was more concentration and more survivals of certain aspects of different ethnic groups than in other places, given the time period and the circumstance. And New Orleans in Louisiana in general is unique because, unlike the United States at this time before the Louisiana Purchase, although the French, of course, were slaveholders, they allowed the Africans to maintain much of their African cultures, and it's those things that blended with a few Native American things, as well as Indo with the Indo-Europeans culture, because there was amalgamation, and which created a group called the Creoles, that all of this joined together to create the African American culture specific to Louisiana and New Orleans in particular. And it's because of that amalgam that you get jazz music, which births a whole slew of genres in the United States and around the world. And we'll get to that later, right? So it is because we have more ancestors than the Zulu that they don't understand what it means to have a Pan-African a multi-ethnic background of such a large number, and why certain aspects of those cultures can be taken from in pockets but create a whole new thing. And so that's because in the Zulu historical narrative, the Zulus, although a minor group, was actually a colonial group. And the you have a large number of Zulus today because of Tashaka's quote unquote revolution, and him by force amalgamating different other Nguni ethnic groups and making them Zulu, right? So you have colonialism in another context in Southern Africa, and so they don't understand it from the perspective that we have here in the United States. And so hopefully this can add clarity. And so this is just a number of some of the ethnic groups that make up the African Americans in terms of Wolof, Mandingo, the Yoruba, the Fon, the Fanti, the Bambara, the Malinke, the Wahida, the Popo, the Garamontes, the Asante, Fanti, Akan, Timne, Sherbro, the Mende again, Kishi or Kisi, the Papel, the Gori, like how we have Gori Island, Limba, Bola, Balante, the Vai, Gola, Bassa, Grebo, Calabar, the Ebo, the Efik, the Bibio, the Cabinda, the Bakongo, the Malimbo, the Bambo, the Ndungo, the Congo, the Balimbe, the Badondo, the Baimbona, the Luba or the Baluba, the Loango, the Luango, the Umbundu, Ovi Umbundu, the Pimbe, and in the Imbangala. You can also add the Makua or the Makwa. That's the primary group that came out of Mozambique, right? And there's many more like the Don, which we'll get into a little later. And so when you have all of these different groups and there's certain retentions that come from these different groups, you're going to have a mix that emerges uniquely in the United States that does not emerge anywhere else in the world because of the circumstances, right? So in part when people see this, they don't understand what's going on because they don't understand Louisiana history, and they don't know about the Haitian Revolution and how many of the Haitians came to New Orleans or Louisiana in general, and they brung with them voodoo, and how the Congo people, the Congo people, started Congo Square, before the Haitians came, and the Haitians already had Congo traditions as well as Benin traditions and Yoruba traditions, and how Louisiana is made up of Wolof and Sierre people from Senegambia region, and how all of this with along with the Native American and the European tradition produces this masquerade called Mardi Gras. And so what you're seeing is a Pan-African amalgam of different things, right? And all of this is voodoo and Bakongo spirituality masked in Indian lore. And we'll get into that in the second part. And so when you see the Zulus in the Zulu parade, you're not looking at strictly South African Zulus. The only thing that they got from the Zulus in South Africa was the name because of the inspiration of Tashaka Zulu, and the grass skirts that you see here, you know. But this was already part of Congo, part of West African lore and tradition, so it's not exclusive to the Zulu. That's just how African people dressed back in the day. And so the original tramp group or crew, which was a marching band turned fraternal organization, they went with an African theme and went with the name Zulu inspired by T'Chaka Zulu, right? So the name Zulu has been used over and over again in many capacities in the United States. So, the most famous is the Universal Zulu Nation, which was, the premier organization coming out of the Bronx in the beginning times of the hip hop cultural movement, right? And it has since spawned worldwide, and there's even Native American Zulus. And so they're not taking these as ethnic names. These are just names of organizations. And so the Zulu, for example, in Seattle, they have the 206 Zulu and they have the Anahuac Zulu. Now, when you look at their representation, it's not going to have any motifs coming from South African Zulus either. But that's not the point. This is Native American motifs, but they are adopting, of course, African American culture in the form of hip hop and being part of this universal Zulu nation. And the Zulu nation has spread back into the continent itself, even to Uganda. So Uganda has a very rich hip hop scene and hip hop community, as well as a dance hall reggae community, which I encourage everyone to check out. But there are Uganda Zulus, right? And they have their own twist on hip hop itself, and of course they have their own native traditions which shine out the most. But they're Zulu in name. They're not trying to imitate the Zulus in South Africa. They're not going to look like South African Zulus either, right? So there's a location in the United States, a county called Zulu in Jefferson Township in Allen County in the state of Indiana, for example, right? And it was just a name randomly chosen. But this is what we have to understand about the nature of the Zulus. And so to give some background on the Zulu in the Zulu parade, again, the Zulu parade is held by the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club. And it traces its origins to the year 1909, right? But it's actually older than that because there was two parts to this group. So the first part was the marching group that started in 1901, but then they adopted the name Zulu in 1912 and 1914, but they more formalized in terms of the group in 1909. So it actually is a 124-year-old organization, right? And so between 1912 and 1914, the group had adopted an African theme for their costumes. My bad. So the name Zulu was attached in 1909, but they adopted the African garbs in terms of the traditional, not colonial African garbs. So if you see any Zulus trying to show you how Zulus dress, they're doing this in modern times. After the Europeans and the Indians brought certain textiles to Africa, right? A lot of what is being passed off as indigenous African dress is not indigenous African dress. Indigenous African dress is more so shirtless, how you would see the ancient Egyptians who would have they had textiles in terms of a wraparound around the groin area, but that's it. And that's most of Africa. So they replaced it with animal skins, with grasses, thatch and all of that other kind of stuff, which we'll see in a little bit. And that's exactly how the Zulus were looking. And so the group took its inspiration from a vaudeville troupe known as the Smart Set, which performed a skit featuring a Zulu theme at the Temple Theater. So when this traveling comedy and performance group introduced the Tramp organization to the Shaka Zulu Revolution and their resistance to the Europeans before losing to the Europeans that same year. um they decided to name the organization Zulu, right? And so when South Africans are trying to make the argument that the African Americans are trying to say that it has nothing to do with African Americans as a whole, it's one organization in New Orleans, right? That's the name of the organization, it's the name of the fraternal group. And so when you look at like some of the old images of of Zulus in the Amazulu in South Africa. So, for example, when you see this drawing of Tshaka Zulu that was drawn in 1824, and Tshaka Zulu lived from 1781 to 1828. So, this is a drawing of him while he was alive, right? Even though they had photography then, at this particular time, they didn't bring a camera to take a photo of Tashaka, so they drew him. And so you can see kind of the wear. It's kind of these, animal skins and the like, but also what you see on the right of a at a later time in 1879, Cheswayo, who Kayempinde, who was the Zulu king at that time, he's wearing the grass skirts and the like, and so this is going to be very important when you're looking at the Zulu social aid group in part of the costume that they're wearing, right? So this is, forget the pictures that you see now. The pictures that you see now of Amazulus in South Africa with all this colorful print and all of that other kind of stuff, that's new. That's how the dress evolved over time in South Africa. But this is how they looked in the 1800s. These are actual photos of actual Amazulu, and the kings of this time period, right? And so this is on the right hand side, a photo in the 1800s going into the early 1900s of Zulu warriors. And you see they're not wearing any, elaborate garbs because they haven't adopted the textile industry garments yet. And so what you see are like where the arrow at the bottom is pointing to these particular grasses that was common across Africa. This isn't exclusive to the Amazulus. You see on his head, the crown of his head is full of feathers. That is also common across Africa. And you see like the kind of I don't know if it's a bull's tail, horse's tail, whatever, this animal's skin's tail that's also being worn around the chin. That's also all across Africa. So even though the Amazulu inspired the name, the themes actually come from all across Africa. And so you see these, I think this is before 1950 on the left hand side of the Zulus in the Mardi Gras parade in New Orleans. And so you see at the bottom the same type of skirts and you see feathers on their head, right? Again, not exclusive to the Amazulu because African Americans are Pan African genetic wise, right? We have more ancestors than the Zulus in South Africa, which means we have more inspiration for our collective personality and get down, right? And so, if you go and study about like the Amazulu's garments, you will see that they have, beforehand they had these grass skirts called isigige, but what you see right here on the right hand side, that many of the for this example, I think this is the kind that the women wore. But now when you look up isigege, it is translated as loincloth because now South Africans, of course, have adopted the textile basis of their clothing and garments. So the name is transferred. But beforehand, this was a grass skirt and apron, right? And so you see the same thing and I don't know if y'all can see that well, but this is a bunch of Sudanese girls wearing we'll call it the Isigege for the Sudan amongst the Nuer, right? And the Amazulu again, they had a whole bunch of different various uh, material to cover their loins, and I think these are like cow strips or leather strips or the like. In this example, amongst this particular clan in South Africa. So when you see this amongst the modern Mardi Gras masqueraders, you know, when the modern Zulu says that, this isn't part of the Zulu garb, not today, and this isn't representing of Zulus today because they're not trying to imitate the Amazulu. It's Zulu in name, but the garments itself is inspired all across Africa, including the headgear, including the mask, which we'll get into, right? And so we have to have this conversation about Haiti because Haiti is a big part of the conversation. And after the Haitians defeated Napoleon, many of them fled Haiti and primarily landed in two places. That is Louisiana and Florida. And so you'll have a large concentration of voodoo, Benin religion that was held and maintained in Haiti. But Haiti voodoo is not strictly Benin voodoo because, like the African Americans, the Caribbean Africans, and the South American Africans are an amalgam of those 45 different ethnic groups in, varying concentrations, unlike the Zulus of South Africa, right? So their voodoo is also a blend of the Yoruba Isheshe tradition, Ifa and Shango and Ogun, as well as the Bakongo tradition. And so this is just a photo of some practitioners coming out of Haiti. And so when you look at the Haiti's carnival parade, you see, look at the mask on the left-hand side of, and this is a more recent one, but you see the mask with the white around the eyes and the white around the lips area, and it's a black mask. And on the right-hand side, even though this person is in white paint, he has the dots on him to represent Sakpata, which is the West African representation of the ancient Egyptian Sekhmet that traveled to West Africa when many of the clans and families came out of Moreau and traveled through Chad and landed in places like modern-day Nigeria, Benin, and Cameroon. But notice the garment at the bottom that he is wearing. So, whether this is fur or grass, it's the same type of skirt. Because as I stated, the skirts and things that you saw in the early 1800s amongst the Amazulu in South Africa, you found it all across Africa. And it wasn't exclusive to the Zulus. And so even in the modern day, you notice in amongst these Haitians here, this is a ritual, and they are in what? Blackface. Their faces are painted black. This has nothing to do with blackface in the Americas. This is independent. And so you got to understand this when we're talking about the adoption of blackface in the United States amongst people in New Orleans who still have this ancestral memory. And that'll be detailed more in part 2. And so, again, this tradition is African. And this is why you see this in Brazil as well. So at their carnival, you notice that all of this is at carnivals, right? You see this black woman in black facial paint with the with the gold eyes instead of the white normally that you saw in the other picture. to match the garments that she has on, the colorful costume that she has here, right? And so even in modern day, this is a fan, a soccer fan who is from Ghana. And what do you see his face painted as? Black. And if you look closely, you know that this is not his color, because you can see that he didn't paint his face all the way on the forehead, so you still see his brown skin. And you can look at his neck and see his brown skin. This is black paint with white around, black and white around the lips, white around the nose. But he decided to give the Ghanaian colors in terms of the eye mask area. So when we go all the way to the Ivory Coast, as well as Sierra Leone, you meet these people called the Don or the Yakuba. And those, look at these strings on the grass, the same that you would make huts with, is part of the masquerade. Again, these are masquerades. There's a theme going on, right? And so this person is actually wearing the pitch black mask with the white eyes. Others are wearing the face paint, multicolored face paint, but painted black on one side on the top left-hand corner, and it's all black on the right-hand corner. If you can see, you may need to expand your screen to see on the right-hand side the black face paint of the brother on the right. And notice that he has white lips and he has white on the nose, just kind of like how this brother on the left-hand side has white on the nose. And so this is a mask from the same people of the Don people. So you notice the eyes, notice the lips, and notice that the mask is painted black. And this is another mask from the same group. Notice that the mask is pitch black and is white around the eyes. They decided to add some cowrie shells to this, and cowrie shells are not native to West Africa. They were brought there as currency from Egypt, right? But notice the feathers on the back of the skirt. I mean the crown. I'll say the crown part of the mask, right? And so we see another variation. We see the white eyelids here. We see red around the eyes as part of a kind of a Zorro mask, but you see the face is painted pitch black. Again, with cowrie shells, and in the back you see nothing but feathers. And that grass acting as a beard, as a mane around the mask. And so again, this is from the same group. I'm just showing the same group because I want y'all to pay attention to what's going on here. So notice the white lips, the white around the eyes, the dark skin, the dark color of the mask in both the center, and the one in the center has the feathers. It's an elaborate costume. So when you look on the right-hand side and you see this Zulu from the Zulu Social Aid and Pleasure Club, he still has on the traditional African grass, apron and skirt. He has the elaborate crown with the feathers in the back, and he has the mask with the white around the eyes and the white lips. And so again, this is African, but it is also just indigenous. And so this group that I'm showing you here is not continental Africans. These are people from Papua New Guinea, black folks who live in Papua New Guinea, brown-skinned folks. But notice that they're in this photo here, these women are painted with their faces pitch black. And look at the skirts that they're wearing. And notice that they're wearing head crowns with these elaborate feathers and these embroideries, just like what we saw in Liberia, and just like what we saw In Haiti, just what we saw in New Orleans. And we see the men of Papua New Guinea, not with the elaborate face paint as we saw earlier, but with the same type of skirts. And so the black face paint with the white eyes is reserved for the masquerades, the spirits that are being depicted on the left hand side. And so this whole idea of body paint in pitch black is also Native American amongst the Mayans, and we see it in their artwork. And this is where the mistake that a lot of pseudo historians keep trying to make the Mayans indigenous black people, because you see these pitch black representations. It's body paint. And you find this all up and down with these Native Americans. So here's a living group today that still paint their bodies in classical ritual, right? And this is in Central America here. This person's body is all black, including the face. Whereas these two warriors here with the bows trying to shoot at a drone is painted all red, right? So even when we go amongst the Aztecs in Mexico, their deities are pitch black, painted in black. But they have their Native American skin color also, but with the white eyes. So we go back to the Mayans here in this fresco in Mexico. You see the pitch black paint, body paint, but you see around the eyes that they painted themselves white for these two on the right-hand side. But the whole face is painted black to the individual on the left-hand side. And they all have these elaborate feathers and all the other kind of implements on the crowns of their head. So this is an indigenous tradition that finds parallels in Africa, Papua New Guinea, and in the Americas amongst the Native Americans here. And that's exactly what the Africans who just came out of slavery have been knowing and been identifying with, because, you know, we were close in many aspects to Native Americans, and we saw parallels from what they did to what we did naturally coming off of the continent of Africa. So the Africans blended the two, a kind of syncretism, right? So this is a Mardi Gras Indian, but all of this is Haitian voodoo. This is what we call masking Indian in New Orleans. And so when you see, for example, those black masks with the white spots in various locations, that's indigenous African. And so here's a Gabon mask from Sogo, which is an initiation into the Bwiti Sacred Society. And I got this from this book, Secrecy, African Art That Conceals and Reveals. And so I encourage everyone to, you know, read books like The Bantu Speaking Heritage of the United States, because it'll inform you of certain characteristics that were maintained by African Americans based upon, for example, their Bantu heritage. And if you want to expand outside the Bantu speakers of Central and Southeast Africa, you get this book, Africanisms in American Culture by Joseph Holloway. And we're going now into part 2. And when we come back from part 2, we're going to dive into this text, Jazz Religion, the Second Line, and Black New Orleans by Richard Brent Turner. So I hope you enjoyed this. Make sure that you like the video and share it with your friends. Make sure you take notes and come back for part 2. Hotep.